Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Estela, and now we are getting ready for our next presenter. Let me tell you about her. Her name is Luciana Fernández, and Luciana is a graduate teacher of English and a teacher educator who has 27 years experience in the field of education. She has specialized in methodology, teaching practice, early years education, literacy, and critical thinking. She holds a diploma in educational research from University of Cambridge, Faculty of Education. She has also two postgraduate certifications in English for Comprehension and Thinking Cultures, Fundacies Colombia. Lucia has presented at numerous congresses and conventions, both nationally and internationally, and was awarded an IATEFL scholarship in 2016. At present, she is a senior academic consultant for National Geographic Learning and Trinity College London, Argentina. And she is an educational advisor at several schools. She has been both a teacher and head teacher at several institutions in Buenos Aires and has been a teacher training at ESSARP, English Speaking Scholastic Association of the River Plate, for the past 14 years. And she has an excellent and very important topic to share with us. The topic name is Engaging Students Actively in Formative Assessment. Formative assessment is a planned, ongoing process used by all students and teachers during learning and teaching to elicit and use evidence of student learning, to improve student understanding of intended disciplinary learning outcomes, and support students to become self-directed learners. Effective use of the formative assessment process requires students and teachers to integrate and embed the following practices in a collaborative and respectful classroom environment. It is the aim of this session to explore how to embed assessment and engage students actively through the use of effective assessment techniques and strategies. Let me give her a warm welcome to Luciana Fernández. Good afternoon, Luciana. Thank you so much for being part of these conferences. We are very happy to have you
Hello, Estela. Hello, everyone. I am really, really very happy to be with all of you today. I want to thank National Geographic Learning and, of course, CBA for making it possible for me to be with all of you today, talking about a topic I am particularly interested in. And I also hope you make the most of this session. Today, we're going to be talking about engaging students actively in formative assessment. So, if that's okay with you, we're going to start my session. All right. So, here we go. Engaging students actively in formative assessment. I wonder if you can see my slides now. All right. As Estela mentioned before, my name is Luciana Fernández, and I am a National Geographic Learning Senior Academic Consultant. So I would like to get started, okay? Looks like you cannot see my slides. I wonder, Estela, if you can help me with that.
Yes, please, Luciana, can you share your presentation?
Okay, here we go.
There we go.
I'm pretty sure my slides in a second.
Yes,
Yes, good.
there you
So, students actively informative assessment. Good. So, I'm going to get started with sharing the agenda for today. All right. Today, we're going to be answering a couple of very important questions if we're going to be talking about assessment. The first question we're going to be discussing, everybody, is what is assessment? We're also going to be stopping for a little while to reflect upon assessment. We're going to be looking at the different types of assessment, and I'm going to be directing my attention to assessment for learning. And we're going to be distinguishing assessment for learning from assessment of learning. And just as the name of the session promises, we're going to be talking about assessment for learning or formative assessment in action and how we can actively engage our students. All right. So, dear everybody, I would like each and every of you to have a notebook or a sheet of paper and a pen or a pencil with you, because as I go through the different sections of my presentation, I want you to start reflecting and jotting down some thoughts. All right. So I would really, really appreciate that. And we're going to get started with the first question of the day, which is, what is assessment? If we're going to be talking about assessment, it is absolutely necessary that we answer this question first. So, dear everybody, in your notebook or sheet of paper that you have there beside you, my suggestion is that you can start creating the spidergram that you've got on the screen with a central question: what is assessment? And I want you to start writing randomly the words that come to your mind as you are asking yourself this question: what is assessment for me? If you want to jot down or share some of the ideas coming to your mind in the chat, that would also be awesome. So start thinking, what is assessment for you, dear colleagues? And just as you were thinking what assessment is for you, I would like to start sharing some interesting definitions of assessment. Let us begin with our first definition of assessment. Assessment is a process by which information is obtained relative to some known objective or goal. Assessment is a broad term that includes testing. A test is a special form of assessment. Tests are assessments made under contrived circumstances, especially so that they may be administered. And there are a couple of keywords to pay attention to in this definition, all right? I want you to pay attention to the fact that assessment here is defined as a process that allows us to gather information. So, assessment is about gathering information, all right? I want you to bear that in mind. Maybe you can add this to your spidergram. uh, Obtaining information. And another very important thing to pay attention to in this definition is the fact that the information that we are obtaining from assessment is relative to a known objective or goal. This is going to be very important today, dear teachers. So, gathering information, well known objectives or goals, and something very important here: not taking anything for granted, but tests are not a synonym of assessment. Tests are a way of assessing. I am already reading very interesting contributions in the chat. All right. Thank you very much for participating so actively. But let me share with you a couple of other very interesting definitions of assessment that I have come across. For example, assessment being the process of documenting, usually in measurable terms, knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs. All right. So, and we can keep on adding some keywords to our spider web. Documenting. Assessing is about documenting. And it's not just about assessing knowledge, it's also about assessing skills, attitudes, and beliefs. But moving on, there's another definition here referring to assessment as the ongoing process of gathering, analyzing, and reflecting on evidence to make informed and consistent judgments to improve future student learning. So, what we get from this third definition we are reading together today is the fact that assessment is defined as an ongoing process. Other keywords: gathering information, which we have already discussed, but it's also analyzing that information and reflecting on that evidence that we are obtaining to make informed judgments, always with the aim in mind of improving student uh, learning. Very interesting. And the fourth definition of assessment I wanted to share with you today: assessment is the systematic collection and analysis of information to improve student learning, something that this fourth definition is restating, considered both as a means and as an end, not a one time event, but a dynamic, ongoing process. So, I don't know about you and what you're jotting down there in your sheet of paper or notebook next to you, but assessment, ongoing, dynamic. It's about collecting, analyzing, and reflecting upon information and evidence and acting upon that evidence. That is exactly at the heart of what we're going to be discussing today. So, dear colleagues, this is something that I internally invite you to do. I want you to start thinking. Initially, I asked you to answer the question yourselves: what's assessment for me? And then I presented to you some definitions of assessment. So, my invitation for you is that you start thinking, how is it that these definitions match your initial thoughts, or if there are any new ideas being added by these definitions, or if you can say, look, these definitions pretty much match what I initially brought as an educator to this session on assessment. So this is internally for you to begin to reflect upon your own background knowledge regarding assessment. Now, the first question we discussed today is, what is assessment? But a second question, which is absolutely critical to look at, is, why do we assess? Not what is assessment, but now, why do we assess? And maybe you can replicate this organizer you've got on the screen in your notebook, where we've got the main idea we are discussing now, which is, why do we assess? And we've got three arrows for reason why, reason two, reason three. Maria Elba is already saying, well, to know about how the process of learning is going. That's a very good answer. Start thinking, why do we assess? And just as you are thinking, if probably one of your answers is, because I have to, because I am expected to, because I am required to, because I have to give my students a grade by the end of a unit or a sequence of lessons or a semester or a term, that's a valid answer. As a matter of fact, we all have to. It is expected from us as teachers, and our students and families expect us to tell our students if they are learning, if they are really learning. This is what Beatriz is saying in the chat. So why do we assess? And apart from being expected to, and the part of assessment being one of our many obligations as educators, the answer that I am seeking to find here is exactly what you are share here with all of you, to have a better idea of how to help our students. Leslie, that's an amazing answer. Exactly. We have to assess to know where our students are and to help them know where they are. We need to assess in order to get evidence that our students are making progress. And of course, feedback, Reynaldo, exactly. Feedback is a critical word here. It's going to be with the help of the feedback that we get in those instances that our students are going to propel forward. Excellent. Now, so why do we assess? The truth is that we assess so that the information that we get And the analysis and reflection that we do upon that information has an impact both on learning and teaching. And this is like a highlight. Not only is assessment expected to have an impact on our students' learning, but it is also expected to have an impact on our teaching practice. And that, of course, is all for the sake of our students improving and moving forward. Now, if we assess with the ultimate goal of our students' progress in learning in mind, there's another very important question to look at now. If we assess our students' learning, another question that we have to ask ourselves as educators at this point then is, what is learning? And this question that we are looking at now has a huge impact on assessment. And of course, inevitably, we need to talk about Bloom's taxonomy. Of course, learning is about recognizing and recalling facts. Remembering is part of what learning entails. For many, many years in the field of education, assessment was all about looking at what students could remember. Now, years and years of research, and of course, Bloom's taxonomy itself, are bringing to us the reflection that learning is so much more than remembering. Learning is about remembering, but learning is also about understanding what those facts that I recall and remember mean. But learning is also about applying those facts, those rules, those concepts, those ideas, transferring them to new scenarios. But learning is also breaking down information into component parts, analyzing a story, analyzing a problematic situation. And as neuroscience states, you can only analyze what you understand. So learning is also about analyzing. And learning is also about judging the value of the information that we interact with. So learning is also about evaluating. And of course, learning is about putting all I've learned together into a new whole created by me, a student. So it's really very important. And I hope that in my next slide, you get some help because I really wanted to share this with all of you. You're going to see that in my next slide, you've got the different domains of the taxonomy: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And of course, all this has to do with learning. But what you're going to find in this slide are the powerful verbs which usually we teachers use in our aims and objectives. Or these, better said, are the things we expect our students to do in our lessons. And you're going to notice that we've got verbs such as define, identify, discuss, demonstrate, compare, criticize, examine, generate, hypothesize. So this is going to be a very, very helpful slide. By the way, I'm going to be sharing my presentation with you if that's what you want, but it's going to be very helpful in terms of understanding when I am asking my students to do certain things or engage my students in certain activities that I am actually assessing. It's important for me as an educator to know cognitively how demanding that task or activity happens to be, or what I am, or in what complexity of learning that performance actually is. So, dear teachers, we have looked at what assessment is, why we assess, and also what learning is and the complexity of learning, right? So, what do we assess? That would be like the next question. What do we assess? Of course, we assess content, but we also assess what students can do with the content. So we are talking about content, we are talking about competencies, we are talking about skills. And as we mentioned, as we were exploring some of the definitions we started the session with, we are also assessing attitudes, beliefs, all right, the dispositions of our students. That is all we assess. So we have looked at what assessment is, why we assess, what learning is, and what to assess, what to get evidence of. So, dear everybody, we're going to be moving now into we are plunging into the heart of the topic we are discussing today, and we are going to now move on to the different types of assessment, because assessment is an umbrella term. There are different types of assessment and they all matter. I would really appreciate it if you could let me know in the chat if so far so good, if I have green light to continue, if you happen to have any doubts or questions, if everything is clear, whatever feedback you can provide me with, excellent. All right. So we are now moving into the types of assessment. All right. So it's 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 really very important to know that within the 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 umbrella term assessment, we've got assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. When we talk about assessment of learning, we are talking about assessment which is summative and performance based. So when we use assessment this way, all right, we are talking about the type of assessment that judges results against established standards and benchmarks. All right, this is the most traditional use of assessment. Now, as a professional and as somebody who has worked on the field of assessment for many years, I've got a very personal position here, because you probably know that standardized tests are being questioned. All right, this is probably not a news flash to anybody. I particularly understand that exams have been part of the educational system for many years, and they are still part of the educational system, and they will keep on being part of the educational system. So I am particularly not the kind of professional who wants to do away with exams. I am rather the kind of professional who questions what is being included in an exam, if you know what I mean. But this is where exams would fit, right? In the type of assessment that we call assessment of learning, which in nature happens to be quantitative, all right, which usually provides students with a grade, all right, and which is usually the type of assessment which classifies students into passed or failed or doing very well or not doing that well. Assessment of learning has been questioned and is being questioned, but I think that it's mostly because for many years it was the only type of assessment being paid attention to. Now, when I am saying that assessment is an umbrella term, I'm talking about assessment of learning, summative, and the fact that we talk about it as being summative means that it usually happens at the end of a unit, at the end of a sequence of lessons, at the end of a term, at the end of a semester, at the end of the year. The summative at the end, all right, and usually requiring grading, all right. It's quantitative, and we usually assess against established standards. Now, what other type of assessment are we talking about today? And this is exactly where we are going to plunge into assessment for learning, which is formative. So you may also have heard about this type of assessment as formative assessment, which is real time and diagnostic. Now, used this way, assessment for learning is intended to provide immediate feedback. And as we've been saying so far, that feedback is not only to the learner, but also to the instructor, to the teacher. Okay? And of course, the main characteristic of assessment for learning or formative assessment is that it happens during, all right? During, while the learning is actually happening. So adjustments can be made, all right? So that adjustments can be made both to teaching and learning, all right? So summative at the end, formative during, all right? And Pedro here is saying assessment being formative happens to be a little bit more qualitative. We are looking at the quality, we are looking at the evidence we are obtaining, and we are analyzing that evidence, and we are reflecting upon that evidence, and we are deciding whether we are moving forward, or if adjustments need to be made. Excellent. And last but not least, we've got assessment as learning, which is a self examination by the learner. Now, used this way, this has got this aspect of assessment being metacognitive, in the sense that it involves students in reflecting upon his or her own learning, all right? So, students knowing themselves, becoming responsible for their learning, and actually judging their own work, and being able to reflect upon the evidence that they get as they are engaged in different tasks and activities. So, put in a much simpler way, then assessment of learning is summative, formal, and we are assessing a learning outcome, all right? That's why we talked about assessment of learning happening at the end, all right? At the end of a sequence of lessons, at the end of a week, at the end of a unit, at the end of a project. Whereas assessment for learning is formative, all right? Informal, and of course, it happens during, all right? Allowing both teachers and students to make adjustments to teaching and learning. So, what can we say then to wrap up? Okay, this section in which we are looking at the different types of assessment, and we are directing our attention to formative assessment, which is the one we are going to be exploring. Summative, occurring after instruction. As I said before, usually graded, designed to provide information about the amount of learning that has occurred at a particular point. Whereas formative assessment occurs during instruction, it's not graded because it's not its aim. It's designed to provide information needed to adjust teaching and learning while they are both still occurring. All right. Now, we have, let me recap, but we've done so many things so far. We have answered the question, what is assessment? We have answered the question, why are we assessing? We have looked into the complexity of learning and how much we need to pay attention to if assessment is about looking at our students' learning. And we have also looked at the different types of assessment. And remember, my dear colleagues, this is not a matter of choosing the type of assessment. It's about understanding that assessment is a broad concept and that there are different types of assessment. Now, if you ask me, I've been in the field of education for more than 28 years, and I've been a head teacher myself, a coordinator, a teacher. I've been a student, and I pretty feel that as far as summative assessment is concerned, we've got a lot of experience and we know how to carry this out. And I feel, it's my humble opinion that I want to share with you today, that we really, really need to strengthen formative assessment instances. That is why the rest of my session today is going to be all about how is it that we can bring all this into the classroom. But so far, are we doing good? Please let me know in the chat if so far so good, if you are ready to move into the practical aspect in which we're going to be looking at how to take formative assessment to our classes. If you have any doubts, I am reading you and enjoying your comments, all right? So I have decided to bring for you a thought-provoking, all right, kind of funny situation, all right. So, look, we've got a dog here, a dog that has been told that he's a bad dog, all right. This is what he has received from his owner, bad dog, and he's going back to his owner, and the dog is saying, "I'm gonna need more specific feedback on my formative assessment." And of course, the dog, the dog has received. If you transfer this to the educational setting, this is the grading the dog has received. I'm a bad dog, but the dog doesn't understand why it's a bad dog. And most importantly, not only is it that the dog does not understand why the dog is a bad dog, but he doesn't understand what is it that he should do to move from being a bad dog to becoming a good one. So he's asking the owner for more specific feedback so that it can make the necessary adjustments to become a better dog. Now, how many, and I want you to stop for a second to think, how how many of our students do not understand why they got the grade they got? Why did they get an 8 or a 10 or a very good or an incomplete or a pass or a fail? They don't get it. And it's not only that they don't know what lies beneath that grade, but most seriously, they don't understand what is it that they should be doing to make any progress. So today somebody, all right, somebody in the chat was talking about the importance of feedback. And of course, if we're going to be talking about formative assessment, then feedback is a critical word. So, formative assessment, what is it and how can it help and how can we bring it into the classroom? The easiest way in which we can explain formative assessment is that students, first of all, and this is mandatory, dear colleagues, they need to know where they are going. That's why in one of the definitions we started analyzing today, it talked about clear and well known goals. The the first thing to say about formative assessment is that formative assessment is impossible to be carried out if students don't know clearly what is expected from them. That is to say, where are they going? Where are they expected to go? Now, with very clear goals in mind and knowing exactly what's expected from them, then we can ask or engage our students in formative assessment instances in which students are going to ask, where am I now? The question, where am I, does not mean anything if I'm not asking this question with reference to that destination I need to get to. Where am I now with reference to where I need to be? All right? Where am I in my learning? Where am I now with reference to where I need to be? This is expected to me. I am expected to be able to do this, and that. But now, am I getting there? Am I any near that destination, or am I stuck, or am I lost? Because if I am stuck or if I am lost, then I need help from my teacher and I need to be redirected so I close the gap between where I am and where I need to go. So, formative assessment process, as a process is not a one-time thing. It's not unplanned. It's not moving on regardless of the fact that evidence is shouting to the top of its lungs that a student is stuck. And of course, it doesn't involve grading. What formative assessment is a process. It has to be planned. Those moments where we stop to reflect upon where we are, with reference to where we need to go need to be planned. And these are instances in which teachers and students collaboratively are going to use the evidence to make the necessary changes, both to my own teaching as a teacher and students to their learning, with the only aim of moving forward towards that destination. And of course, as somebody was saying in the chat, it's the feedback that students get from us, teachers. And it's the feedback that they might be getting from a peer, plus the feedback they give to the teacher. This feedback provided from teacher to student, student to teacher, and students to students, it's that feedback, the one that we're going to be using to make the necessary adjustments. So now we are moving into the last section of my presentation today, in which we're going to be talking about formative assessment principles, that is to say, the ABCs of formative assessment, and I'm going to be providing you with clear examples, all right? Now, why at this point is it that we need to talk about formative assessment principles? Research indicates that quality assessment positively affects levels of student learning, student efficacy, and learner engagement. So it's absolutely worth our effort to use formative assessment because it's been proved, all right, that it positively affects our students' learning and engagement and their efficacy. That is to say, they become better learners. And the other very important thing to highlight here is that teachers play a critical role in using thoughtful, differentiated assessment practices, focused feedback, and clear reporting guidelines. So, for formative assessment to be brought into the classroom, it requires that we teachers know about and strategically choose the right assessment practices, tools, that we provide feedback that is intended to help students move forward or stop being stuck, and that we clearly report to the students the guidelines, the step-by-step actions that they need to be engaged in order to make progress. So the first principle, the first thing to say about formative assessment is that whatever assessment you decide to carry out in your classrooms must be aligned with essential curricular concepts, content, expectations, and learning goals. So going back to the initial definition we analyzed together today, it's absolutely mandatory that our students understand what is expected from them. So you as teachers, when you plan your projects, your units, or your sequence of lessons, you teachers always have objectives and aims. Now, these objectives and these aims are not just for you. These objectives and aims are to be shared by students because those aims and objectives are what you expect students to be able to do. They refer to content, they refer to skills, they refer to attitude and dispositions. That is what you expect from your students. And you cannot keep that to yourselves. It has to be shared with students. So if we really want to talk about formative assessment, that is the first thing to say. I don't know how visual you are, but to understand this very clearly, you've got a map on the screen, all right? Just to exemplify what formative assessment in action is. It's very important that you and your students know where you are departing from. This is the type of assessment we know as diagnostic. So at the beginning of a unit, at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of a term, and even at the beginning of a class, you do want to know what is it that your students already know. That is the departure point. And this is not just for you, teachers. Students must also become aware of where they are. What is it that they already know? What is it that what can they do already? Where am I? Where am I departing from? The other very important thing is that we explicitly share with our students where they need to get the destination. By the end of this unit, by the end of this sequence of lessons, by the end of this project, you will be expected to be able to do this, and that. The objectives, do you remember? What we expect, the learning outcome of that unit, of those lessons, what you expect students to be able to do. So once students have become aware of the departure point and where they need to get, then formative assessment is stopping at given points of the way, stopping at given moments as we are walking towards the destination to ask ourselves, where am I? And the only way in which I can effectively ask myself, where am I, is if I know where I departed from and where I need to go. Otherwise, how can I assess if I have moved forward, if I am stuck, or if I am getting any nearby my destination? Does it make any sense? So now, Principle 1, sharing the objectives. Principle 2, okay? Yes, Danny. Danny says, please, idea to evaluate where we are at the moment. In a second, dear Danny. Just hold your horses. Principle number 2, assessment methods must be appropriate for and compatible with the purpose and context of the assessment. So, whatever assessment that we are using to ask ourselves if we are making any progress, if we are moving forward, need to be aligned with those objectives, all right? So it's very, very important, and I'm quoting here Wiggins and McTighe 2005, the questions that teachers have to ask themselves when planning assessment. And the questions are, what would be sufficient and revealing evidence of understanding? What tasks do I have to involve my students with which will give me evidence of progress? What different types of evidence are there? Against what criteria am I going to judge the work being done by my students? And will the assessment reveal and distinguish those who are really walking towards the destination and those who are not? These are the questions that we thoughtfully need to ask ourselves. So, a couple of examples, and now we are going to be we're going to be looking at lots of examples of how to bring formative assessment into the classroom. But a couple of things to say. Always share the unit goals with your students in any format, but make sure that you share them. So, for example, in a unit called Where We Live, first thing we've got there are the unit goals. So by the end of this unit, you're going to be talking about how long or how often. You're going to be discussing why people move. You're going to be able to give reasons and explain results. You're going to be discussing improving communities, and you're going to be describing places to live. All these learning objectives, if you look into them, require the teaching and the learning of both content and skills, and content that is content per se, and content that is related to language. So socializing goals is mandatory, all right? If, with another example for younger students, all right, by the end of this project, you are expected to describe a day, say what you can and can't do, say what you like and what you don't like, and you have to include a picture. So students from the very beginning are well informed about what's expected from them. Now, a chart that I always suggest to you teachers is that when you are planning your lessons, you start thinking about the expected learning outcomes first. By the end of this unit, by the end of this project, by the end of this sequence of lessons, I expect my students to be able to do this, and that. And you list them in the first column, which is expected learning outcomes. In the second column, you have to start thinking by involving your students in what kind of activity or task are you gonna get evidence that those learning outcomes are actually happening. All right. So you start planning the activities that you are going to engage your students in, always with the learning outcomes in mind. And then the other thing to think is the assessment criteria. So, what are you going to pay attention to as students are engaged in that activity that will help you decide if that student is moving forward or not? So I want you to see the strong connection that exists between very clear and well socialized objectives with formative assessment. Now, principle 3 says that formative assessment has to be ongoing, varied, and central to the instructional learning cycle. So, again, for those of you who are visual, okay, here, as you can see, we've got an image of a camera, a snapshot, and then an image referring to streaming, which is happening right now, all right? So, understanding the analogy, this is the challenge that I've got for you now. If summative assessment can be described as a digital snapshot, formative assessment is like streaming video. Remember what we said about summative assessment is a one-time thing. It shows us what a student can do at a particular moment under contrived circumstances, whereas formative assessment is ongoing. It happens along the way. Do you remember the image of the map? It happens along the way. So, let us now, all right, go quickly through a last challenge before we see examples of formative assessment tools that you can use, all right? So, I have brought for you some sentences about formative assessment which are incomplete and which you will have to complete with, all right? The words that you've got in the balloons. So you've got modify and differentiate, scores and grades, during the instructional cycle, learning opportunities, targeted feedback. So let us try to think about all this together, right? Assessment for learning, formative assessment, the one we are discussing now, designed to improve learning and achievement, occurs when, people? What do you think? When does assessment for learning occur? How would you complete this sentence? Anybody dares an answer in the chat? You're more than welcome. Assessment for learning occurs when? Which of the balloons would you choose to complete that first sentence? Exactly. Good, 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 good. during the instructional cycle, Monica. Exactly. It does not involve what? For assignments and tasks. It does not involve what? But instead turns assessments into, let's see. Yes, it happens during the process. Excellent, Beatriz. It does not involve what? It does not involve scores and grades. Remember, we talked about it. That's a characteristic of summative assessment. It does not involve scores and grades and turns assessment, excellent, very good, Monica, again. It turns assessments into learning opportunities. Fantastic. So, formative is all about happening during, no scores, no grades. It turns assessment into learning opportunities. The focus of formative assessment is to provide students. What is it that we have to give students and students have to give us during formative assessment? Do you remember? What is it that we have to give students during formative assessment and students have to give us and students can give students also? Exactly. Targeted feedback during the unit of study, and it's going to be this feedback that is going to guide students with the next step of their learning. Excellent. And last but not least, assessment for learning is designed to give teachers information. So, what do we do with the information that we get? Exactly. We can modify and differentiate the teaching and the learning. Outstanding, people. Excellent. So I'm going to be sharing with you now formative assessment tools and techniques which are used worldwide and which I'm pretty sure you will be able to adopt and adapt to your own teaching contexts. So I'm going to be sharing with you some pre-assessment. Do you remember? Diagnostic, okay, some quick formative assessment checks, and I'm also going to be sharing with you some visible thinking routines which are a must in the classroom, all right? Now, what pre-assessment tools can we use? Remember that the pre-assessment tools are intended to assess what students know, believe, assume before the learning instance. It's what they know before. So you can use, for example, webbing graphic organizers, just as I've been doing with you, all right, with a question in the middle so that students can start like brainstorming and jotting down ideas or showing you the connections, the personal connections that they are making. You can use fantastic thinking routines such as what I already know, what I wonder, or what I would love to know, and then go back with what we have learned. These are excellent pre-assessment tools that will allow you and will allow your students to realize where they are initially. Do you remember the departure point? I love also this other version of the typical KWL chart. What we know, what we've learned, for example, from the reading or from the video or from the experiment or from the discussion, and what we still wonder after the reading, after the video, after the discussion. So it's a way of recording, okay, where students are, all right, where students actually got to, and also posing a possible new destination. We are wondering new things, we have new questions, we have a new quest ahead. Now, as for quick formative assessment checks, one of the formative assessment checks widely used are traffic lights, okay? And the traffic lights, of course, with the green, students can tell you that they are at a moment in their learning, they are green, they feel confident, that they understand the concept, or that they are doing well, they are ready for the next challenge. If they get a yellow, or if they give themselves a yellow in self-assessment, they feel they are getting there, but they would definitely need more practice or a little bit more of support. Or if they give themselves, or we give them, or they give to appear a red color, I am stuck and I need more help. So this is another version of the traffic light. I found this tricky. I need somebody to help me. I need some help. I understood most of it, but I need more practice. I get it. I understood. I am ready for what comes next. Again, if you want to have something done quickly in the classroom, you can go with a code such as thumbs up, or thumb sideways, or thumbs down, which is going to give you visually an idea of who feels I'm a thumb up. Oh, over there I see 4 or 5 students thumb sideways, or look, I've got quite a number of students with thumbs down. This means that I have to adjust. We have to do something. We are not getting there. So this is a way of getting an overall idea very quickly of where students feel they are. Another thing that I strongly suggest for you to gather information from your students is using exit slips or tickets. There are very many, all right? I will be sharing my email address with you, and if you want me to share more with you, I will. But exit tickets are exactly these short slips where students can engage in a reflection upon their learning. So for example, they can be given to students at the end of a class, or at the end of a unit, or at the end of a project. So students can tell you, I learned that, I still need help with, and they can also rate their understanding. But other versions of exit tickets. One thing I have a question about after today's class, 2 things I learned today, 3 things that I feel I can build on. Or for example, this other exit ticket, write 2 questions for a partner and then swap the exit ticket. So I have a question I'm not very sure of, and I exchange it with my partner, and then probably my partner can explain it to me. These are excellent tools. More options of exit tickets. So 3 things I learned today. 2 things that I found interesting. This is like the appreciative aspect, and a question that I have. Or this other exit ticket called Let Your Mind Speak. What you learned, questions that you have, what you feel you need to work on, and personal connections that you have made. Yes, Marisela, exit tickets are the bomb. I agree. They really, really help. But if you really want to know what I use the most in the schools where I am an advisor and where I've been a teacher, I am an absolute believer of visible thinking routines, because precisely these routines help make our students' thinking visible to themselves and visible to others. I'm going to be sharing with you some examples. So, for example, if you are using images in your class, you want to use the routine called I see, I think, I wonder. So it's not just asking our students, what can you see, but also, what do you think about what you see? And what are your questions? What are your wonderings? All right. Or ask a question, get students to think individually, then share with a mate, and then share with the rest of the class. Or, for example, if we bring a topic to the classroom, engage students in making a claim about this topic, an explanation, a personal interpretation, identifying support for that claim. That is to say, how or what are they using to say what they are saying, and asking a question, getting students to make connections and inferences, and asking questions is a very good way of assessing where they are in their learning at different moments of the learning path. This link I'm sharing with you, dear colleagues, is where you can find all thinking routines with their given explanation. You don't want to miss this website. Remember, I'm going to be sharing my presentation with you if you want, but this is the website where you get all PDFs of these wonderful visible thinking routines to actually get in your students' mind and thinking at different points within a unit or sequence of lessons. And principle 4, and we are getting to the end now, is all about involving students in setting personal goals and monitoring their progress. So it's very important to engage students in self assessment in instances where they can reflect upon themselves as learners. All right. And I want to share in this last minute I'm going to take some examples. Okay. Remember that the essential questions for students to actively engage in formative assessment is that they ask themselves, where was I going? What is it that I am expected to do by the end of this unit? Where am I now in my learning? And what strategy or strategies or resources will help me get where I need to go? And all these taken to the classroom implies that you need to model self assessment, you need to give opportunities for self assessment, you need to give specific and descriptive feedback, and you need to revisit the goals frequently. Don't socialize or share the goals at the beginning and then forget about them. Constantly go back to the goals. The most used tools for self and peer assessment, according to research, are rubrics, scripts, journals, portfolios, traffic lights, which we have already shared, exit slips or exit cards, which we have already shared, paired marking, and dedicated improvement and reflection time. Rubrics are a widely known assessment tool, okay? And it's a list of the criteria for students to look at their work, look at the work of a peer, and also have their work looked at. And it goes like this, okay? So usually it's a 3, 2, 1, or excellent, very good, or good, and the criteria. What makes it a 3? What makes it a 2? What makes it a 1? And what we have very detailed here is exactly what we are paying attention to. Okay? I am paying attention to these criteria to judge your work. And based on this is the judgment of my work to you. And it's going to be the judgment of your own work and the judgment of the work of a peer. Scripts are a simple scripts are like rubrics, but they are narrated as if students were talking to themselves. For example, while reading, I can ask many questions. I can explain while reading. So it's written in the first person, okay, as if the student were talking to him or herself. It might have questions, but always with the I. So that's why we call it script, because it's as if we were giving students the questions they have to ask themselves or the things they have to say to themselves as they are looking back at their work. Journals. This is simply an instance of reflection, getting to think about my work, okay? So questions such as, how are the strategies I am learning working? What thing will I remember after this lesson and why? What questions do I have still after the lesson? So exit slips can be used as journals, but a journal can be something like this. Oh, these are the top 3 wins of the lesson for me today. These were the 3 challenges for me in this lesson. And then a space for students to write or draw or express themselves in relation to the lesson. You can't imagine how powerful these tools are, dear teachers. Portfolios. Portfolio is a collection of work that the student carries out. The student chooses from his or her work the work that he or she believes evidences learning. How amazing is that? So let us imagine that I've just written an essay, and I think that this essay shows clearly that I've learned or that I have achieved all the goals. And so I put it in my portfolio and then I share it with my teacher. So this is what a portfolio looks like. And it's fantastic to be collecting work from the beginning of the year, mid-year, or end of the year to show progress. And as we've been saying, exit cards and slips, which are absolutely excellent. So, for example, look at this other example of exit task. After today's lesson, do you have any lingering questions? Perhaps you have some tough questions you want to ask your teacher or you want to ask your peer. And these are the questions that are going to drive your lessons afterwards. So, really, really useful. And paired marking is all about students working together and judging their work. So, students, for example, can spot faults, or this is what I would definitely suggest you improve in your work, dear partner. And then I give you a suggestion as for how to fix it. So, dear everybody, pretty aware that my time is up. I'm going to leave you with this. Remember that I started by igniting your beliefs, assumptions, and knowledge about assessment. I would like you to engage in another routine that I use a lot with my students, which is called I used to think, now I think. Start thinking to yourselves, what is it that you used to think about formative assessment that you don't think any longer now, or which this session has hopefully helped you rethink? So, with nothing further to say but thank you, here is my email address if you want to contact me so that I can share my presentation with you or any assessment tools that I have mentioned that you feel you might be taking to your own context. I would be more than happy to share. Thank you so much for your lovely comments. And I'm done so I can listen to any questions that you may have. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Luciana. This was such a great presentation. We are so happy to have you here. Everybody's so happy with what you have shared. It was so interesting. I took a lot of notes.
Oh, thank you.
Really,
It
really
makes me happy
happy.
to hear that. It makes me happy to hear that. And I'm more than thankful for the comments. And I really, really wish to remain in contact with you all. Should you have any questions or comments, let us stay in touch. I will be more than willing to share with all of you. And I really look forward to seeing you again in whatever modality, right? Thank you so much. Thank you really so much.
Thank you very much, Luciana. This was such a great presentation. Thank you for being part of it. Thank you to the audience for having participated so actively. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye.